Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Cool Colas here to bring you the hustler's perspective. I hope everybody is having a good day today. I got an interesting topic for you guys today. I want to talk to you all about whether or not your area or wherever you live at matters as far as your success goes. Now, let me tell you what kind of got me into this topic. I saw an interesting post on Facebook recently, and it was an acquaintance of mine who posted this, and she said something about how she was tired of hearing people blaming their circumstance on a city or an area and as to why they're not successful. And I kind of wanted to give my 2 cents on the topic and then what I believe and what I thought. So the first thing I thought was that I needed to kind of flip this around because this matter was obviously about her venting about how irritating it is to hear people complain about blaming their area on how much success they've had or why they are not successful. So I kind of translated this into a subject of talking about whether or not your area actually matters for your level of success rather than talking about a person complaining about it. So let me kind of get into my points here. The first thing that I think about this whole thing is I think when we talk about this topic, I think stuff like this is talked about very commonly, but I think what happens is we don't really define, or the person who's at least complaining about an issue such as this doesn't really define what they mean by success. I think that the word success is kind of thrown out there arbitrarily, and then there's not really a definition of what they meant as far as success goes. So what happens is when you don't do that, it becomes a blanket statement, like you're trying to cover all of your bases. And what tends to happen is you falsify your statement, or you lose validity in your statement because you're not necessarily specifying what it is that you're talking about. So I guess like what I kind of took from her I guess comment was she was talking about one of three things, and my opinion is that she probably was again like making a blanket statement to cover all of her bases. So I think that the three things that she may or may not have been talking about were job success, business success, and financial success. So I think those are kind of like the areas where she was trying to discuss that she heard people saying that they weren't having success because of their area. So I think those are the three things that like it would probably cover. Chances are, if she's making a statement like that, she didn't really specify it, so we can assume that she's probably talking about all three to some capacity. Seeing as a person may have weighed out all their options and it just didn't work out in any way, shape, or form. I think it's always best though that we break down this process because we need to really sit there and analyze our options and what does and does not work. And I think for this topic, especially when we're talking about an area, we really need to analyze how effective your area is in all of these aspects, or at least most of these aspects. So to me, I think that the first thing that I want to kind of throw out here, as far as like my opinion on the matter, is this. I think that, and this is my disclaimer, I think that the idea or something that you're trying to create or something that you're trying to achieve, that does not come from a city, that comes from a person. So in other words, I think it's up to a person to create something that they see in their vision, that they see possible, and that they see themselves doing in the long run, or they see themselves wanting to do in the near future even. So I think that it's safe to say that a city cannot dictate the creation of an idea for you personally, as far as you creating a goal and what you want to do, and things like that. A city does not dictate that. Now let's kind of get on to like the real kind of interesting stuff here. One thing that you need to really consider here with this topic and is that everyone's circumstance is kind of different. So it's safe to assume that if you don't consider those things, then you're kind of being ignorant of certain situations that may differ from one person to another. So I think it's best to consider that before you criticize someone else. And that's in regards to this person who made this statement. So what I mean by everybody's circumstance is different is I feel as though there are some people who are are just lazy. You're always going to have lazy people. You're always going to have people who are going to find someone else to blame other than themselves. So, with that being said, I mean, there's nothing else to argue here. You're right. The area is not to blame for your success if you're not doing anything, you're not weighing out your options. Now, you could be mid process and you could feel like things are not working out for you, and you could feel like you've tried everything, and you could have tried a lot of things. So I think for that, I would have, me personally, I would have a little bit more empathy and understanding for a person like that, because one could just sit there and think like maybe a person would try to figure out what the issue is, and maybe they think it's not really themselves not trying something. Maybe it's like how they've been doing it or where they've been doing it at. So I think those things are really important to consider, because you just got to look at perspective. And again, if you're not looking at that before criticizing, then that's, to me, that's kind of ignorant. Now, let's kind of think about kind of these two types of success that I was talking about. I know, well, I mentioned three. I mentioned job success or career success. I mentioned, entrepreneur or business success, and I mentioned financial success. So financial success is probably going to come with one of those two things. Of course, if you're doing what you need to do, but so I want to focus on like the other two. So we'll start with jobs here, and if job success matters as far as your area goes. So the first thing that I want to say is that if you are not in an area that's large, you probably do have a lower chance of finding the job that you want, and that doesn't, although that doesn't necessarily matter, nor is that necessarily true. And we're kind of talking about possibilities. It could make the job market in general difficult for graduates or for just others in general. So if you're in an area that's not heavily populated, your chances are probably going to be lower for trying to find people who want to move into the city, because there's nothing available for them. So I would say that that part does matter. How big your area is. The other thing I said is that maybe people, and I think this may be perspective personally more than it may be an actual point to consider on this. Maybe people aren't necessarily blaming the area, but they feel as though they would have a better chance in another area than they would in the area that they're in, because the area doesn't have the industry that they're looking for career wise. So I mean, like, with that being said, it would matter at that point, because it's the truth. You got to think about all these different areas that have all these different like places that like people can work at, and they have like different industries that they specialize in. So that's something that you really have to consider. The only thing that I feel like a person can even do in a career and a job related I guess success line is, all they can do is apologize. I was gonna say apologize. Sorry. All they can do is apply. They can polish their resume. They can continue to interview and try to make that the best that they can, because ultimately they're doing everything they can to appeal to a company to basically sell themselves, to see if they're the match that that company is looking for. So at the end of the day, it falls into the company's hands if you've done everything that you can. So I think in a sense it's kind of limited, which means that it would rely on the area, because there's going to be a certain amount of opportunities. And knowing how hard the job market can possibly be, that's something that really needs to be taken into consideration, is whether or not your area actually has opportunities for that specific industry, and things like that. The next thing I want to say is anyone who meant like that statement that she said, anyone who believes what she said about the area, that people shouldn't blame it. People shouldn't say it's the area's issue as to why they can't get opportunities and things like that. My personal opinion is that your area should matter, and if you feel like it does not matter in this instance, then anybody who believes what she said, they should be able to go to anywhere, meaning like the middle of nowhere, or somewhere like very dangerous, like in Venezuela or whatever, and they should be able to go there and then try to find a job or try to find career success in that area. and then not complain about it. That's just my opinion on that. And I feel as though if you're in a small town, the first thing that you're going to say is, I'm in a small town. There's nothing here but farmland and crop circles and no opportunity. So at that moment, you're blaming your area, and you're saying, I'm going to go to a different area because this area just, it doesn't have the opportunity there. So at that point, it does matter, because if you go to a larger town, then you may have better success, like I kind of said earlier. So my challenge for people who believe that I guess like your success, at least on a job scale, does not matter based off of your area. Someone who doesn't feel like it matters, I challenge them to go and live in an area that is rural, that has barns, has crop circles, has a limited amount of people, maybe 2,000, 3,000 people, live there, survive, thrive, get a job, and or try to find a job, and then tell me if the area matters or not. That's kind of my first challenge for them. The next thing I kind of want to point out is an interesting conversation that I had actually while I was doing an Uber, more so. The conversation that I had was with this rider of mine, and we were just talking about job opportunities and success and things like that. And to me, like, the initial conversation was about success itself. So again, it's a very arbitrary thing to talk about. He was also talking about opportunities, another very arbitrary thing to talk about that people don't really define too much. So to me, he told me the same thing that this person on my Facebook said and made the comment on. And what he said to me was, it doesn't matter. And he said it does not matter because it's all about hustle. What he told me is that, like, he came from Chicago. He said in Chicago he felt like it was more difficult for him to secure an opportunity because so many people already have their cliques and people who they know and people who they function with, basically. And it's hard to kind of get in and fit in. And he said a smaller city like Grand Rapids, which is kind of like the major area that I'm currently living in, he was basically saying that, like, a smaller city like that, it was going to be easier for him to kind of make connections, or he felt like anybody else. So he said, putting into perspective, it doesn't, it's all about hustle at the end of the day, and that's what it comes down to. Now, this is kind of my personal opinion on what he was saying. Now, I understand the whole hustle thing, and what he told me was he kind of, I guess, like, I interjected a statement, but and I told him that you have to think about it like this, man. I said, like, everything's going to require hustle. Everything you do is going to require hard work. Everything that you do is going to require effort on your part, getting up and you doing what you need to do to try to, get the job done or whatever it is that you need to get done. That's just a fact. That's just something that you have to kind of like realize, and that everybody needs to realize that, you're already at fault if you don't do anything. Now, his statement that I did not agree with was this idea that it didn't matter, and from his perspective, because to me, his perspective contradicted itself. What he said was that it didn't matter, but then he went on to say that in Chicago it was going to be harder because it was a larger city where people already made connections and people already like had kind of formed their cliques with one another, business wise or job wise. Well, I don't know what he was talking about, but either one of those two. And he was basically saying that it was harder to kind of make those connections in Chicago as opposed to somewhere in Grand Rapids, where there's only like a little bit less than 200,000 people in that city alone. And that's contradictory, because he just said that it wouldn't have mattered because it's all about hustle. But then he said it mattered. Well, he kind of like inferred that it mattered by saying that it would be easier in Grand Rapids than Chicago. So at that point, he proved that it would matter. So his statement, even despite what he was, I guess, like trying to, say, he kind of like contradicted himself, his own statement, by saying that Chicago, it was harder than Grand Rapids. So either way, whether what he's saying is true or not, he pretty much proved that it would matter at that point. So the argument that he made still showed that there was going to be some type of variation between a larger area than a smaller area. So whether you're comparing two things, whether it's that there's going to be less opportunity in a smaller area, or it's going to be too saturated in a larger area, you're making a comparison, which means that you're showing what is unique about two different areas instead of just saying that they're all going to be the same and it's all about hustle and things like that. Now again, it is totally about hustle and it is about drive. There is no questioning that. There is nothing that can be argued about whether or not that is a requirement. But my thing is, show me an argument where the area does not matter. Like I don't think a person has been able to do that so far. Now you might know one, and if you do, like, I would love to hear it. But I don't think that really in any way, shape, or form proves that it doesn't matter. If anything, it does the direct opposite. The other thing he went to tell me is that he went on to tell me when we had this conversation was um, he comes from a city where because I told him what I just told you. He comes from a city where all he knows is like hustling, and that's pretty much it. And what I told him was this. I said, look, man, I said, I come from a city with the same stuff. So, I mean, you're arguing a point with me as if I don't really know, but I do know. I think at the end of the day, one thing that you have to realize is that you're talking about different things. When you're talking about like jobs and things like that, it's all about like what that city has to offer job wise. So to me, I feel like you need to consider those types of things because some jobs may have, like, I'll just give you an example. If you go to like Charlotte, North Carolina, like it's an area that is totally embossed in the banking industry. And then if you go to some parts of, and I'll compare to Grand Rapids again, Grand Rapids, it's like a big furniture industry, especially like if you go kind of like towards the Holland Zealand area. So I guess like to me, it's like it's all about like a bunch of different factors. It's all about your industry. It's all about the availability based off of that industry. It's all about what you can get from that. And I think those things need to be considered. And what I told him also too was that I had a difficult time finding a job, and I'm a young professional. What I mean by young professional is I got a degree at Western Michigan University. Had a difficult time finding a job, and I think what it came down to is that like there wasn't a lot of what I was doing in school, like I guess like in this area. And so that's why I had like the difficulty I had. Whereas if I went to somewhere like, for example, Houston, Texas, where chemical engineering degrees are pretty much valued, then I probably would have a better turnout than if I would like trying to stay in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So to me, I guess like what I was trying to tell him is that it does matter to a certain extent, and you, without considering those things, you miss a lot of points, and all it becomes is a blanket statement. That's the only point I was trying to make to him. Again, like, not knocking hustle, because I hustle. I promise you, I am a great hustler. I am always hustling, but I think that at the end of the day, you need to consider all those facts, and if you don't, then I mean, like it's just all talk. So the next thing that I kind of wanted to get into with that whole job thing is, and I kind of said this a little bit earlier, is you got to realize when people are lazy and when people are mid hustle. Mid hustle being they're in the middle of doing what they're doing. So again, maybe their opinion was that they felt as though they would have a better chance finding jobs in a certain industry in a different area. If you're lazy, then that's one. Then you got me there because you're not going to have results anyway. But the issue won't be the issue at that point won't be that area. It'll be that person being lazy. So that's a no contest right there. That check mark to them because that's the truth. But I mean, if it's a person who's mid hustle, and what I mean by mid hustle is in the process of hustling, and is continuing to do what they do, and is trying different ways and trying to figure out how to get to where they need to get to, then to me, I feel like that's them just finding a different way, considering a different area. Because the truth of the matter is, there are different areas with different specializations, and without considering that there are these differences, I think we lose this idea of why one place is more unique than another. So if it will all boil down to just hustle at the end of the day, then we would lose what makes every area and every nation even unique. and I just don't necessarily agree with that on a job scale. What the statement that the person on my Facebook, one of my Facebook friends originally made. I don't necessarily agree with what she said because I think the area can definitely play an influence. Now, the next kind of topic that I wanted to uh, get into here is about business and how business matters for this type of thing. So the first thing is, on one hand, I think that if you're going the route of trying to start a business, I think you have to consider the fact that you always have the option of taking your stuff online. So I would even go as far to say that in I don't know how many years, like in several, I would say 5, 10, whatever years it's gonna be. I think everything's gonna like start going towards the being automated. Like everything's gonna be online as far as the business goes. But regardless, that may not be your thing. You may not be good with online stuff, and even then, some people would argue, well, you can learn it. Fine, I agree. But the thing that is going to differentiate one person to another is that idea of passion. If a person is not passionate about something, then they're not going to be good at it. So why try it and why waste the time if you know that's not something that you like? Even and so I guess my point is this. My point is that like some people are going to want in-store businesses because they want a business that's going to require them to have like a storefront where they go in, they do some work, and then they like interact with customers. So that would be like your retail or people who do like restaurants and things like that, which again some of that stuff can be online based, but you might not want to do that. Now I would strongly suggest that you at some point do that, but some people that might not be for them, and business in general might not be for them because it really isn't for everyone. So I think that what I heard hers or this person on my Facebook say, and then a couple other people on there say too, is that they felt as though if you could not I guess have or find an opportunity for yourself, then create one. So to me, they were intertwining the idea of finding it. This is how I interpreted it. They were taking the idea of finding a job, and if you couldn't find a job, to create one for yourself. So I think the way that they were expressing it, and this is my issue with what they were expressing, is they were expressing it like it was simple, and they were doing it based off of the fact that they know a couple people who had done the same thing and who they felt were doing well. Again, you never really know how people are doing, but of course, if you're a business person, you're never going to portray yourself as somebody who's not doing a good job, whether you are or whether you aren't. Again, that's just perspective, and that's a maybe, maybe not, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there. The other thing that you have to kind of think about too is when you're talking about creating a business, it's one thing to create one. It's another thing to have it flourish. In other words, you got to think about the industry as well too. You could go to a certain area and you like have people who specialize in whatever product that you're trying to sell or that you're trying to do. Now, one issue you may run into is competition, which could like hinder you one way. But again, that again would prove that that area would do not as what I'm saying, like not as well as another one. So that proves the idea that the area would matter, like in reverse. Now, the major point that I was trying to make here is that you may have a lot of people who specialize in whatever you're doing, and you may find that there's more clientele and more people who are willing to buy those things in your area or purchase your services in that area than you would in another. I'll give you an example. If I go to Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, any place that I just named there, I probably won't have an issue finding work as a landscaper year round. The reason why I say that is because in the summer, it's going to be hot, so there'll be people to cut grass. In the winter, it's going to be snowing like crazy, so there's going to be people needed to, throw some salt down. There's going to be need people to, they're going to need people to plow. You're going to need people to like get the snow off of the streets. You're going to need all those industries. Whereas I go to, give an example, Louisiana, or I go to Florida, some parts I guess, or you go to somewhere like there, Texas. you won't really have that big demand for it like you would in those Midwestern states where it snows all the freaking time, or you always have like those hot summers where there's always availability to, cut grass, or the fall where there's always availability to rake leaves. So you don't, so like you have like those four seasons a lot in the Midwest. Whereas like in like the South and places like that, you may not get that seasonal type of a build that you would get in the Midwest. So, for example, like if you have snow everywhere and stuff like that in the Midwest, you may not have that same amount, if you go to the South. So I guess to me, you have to kind of think about your industry, and if it matters in a certain area, and if it's something that you're passionate, like if it's something that you're also passionate about as well too. So I think with all those things to be considered, your area would matter, because like it would help in determining, or it would be a factor in determining whether or not you're going to be successful in what you just did, or if you're not. So I think it's important to consider that also on a business level as well too. Originally, without taking some time to think about this topic offhand, I would have told you that hey, everybody needs to automate their stuff and do stuff online, and then their success is going to be I guess based off of that. So really, when it comes down to business, then it doesn't really. I guess your area doesn't matter, but that's not necessarily true, because again, you have to factor in passion. You can be the greatest person in the world at doing something. You can be totally talented. You can be someone who has had so much experience in it, or you can know people who can teach you. Without passion and without the want to do something, then you're not going to do well in it. That's really what it comes down to. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. So to me, like I said, I think the area does matter, because it can play a factor into like your kind of like your success as a business person as well too. Now again, like as far as like having your business online and things like that, not everybody has a business that they're trying to necessarily like take online. Like I said, landscaping will be like limited, but there may be other businesses that may have a need for it. So again, I think that is something that's very up in the air, and I think that your area can kind of vary whether or not like that business that may or may not make it to the internet can flourish itself. So again, I think that this person who talked on Facebook, they spoke a lot about creation of a business. Any average Joe can sit there and create a business. They just don't know it, but it's all about it flourishing, and all about it doing well. And is it going to survive? And are they going to have clientele? And are they going to be able to like sell to different people? So I think what it comes down to is hustle, but I think if we're arguing if the area matters or not, I think one thing that we need to realize is it does. And it's important to consider every single aspect of a person's situation before you judge it. And I think it's also important to consider just different perspectives. But when you make blanket statements like, your area doesn't matter, if you're blaming it, you have to realize that sometimes it's not about blame. Sometimes people feel as though they'll have better success in one area than another, which therefore shows that they probably will, because they're also going to be more apt to want to be in that area and be happy where they're at, and then try to build like their whole like life around it. So passion is going to come with it. So again, like business is totally regulated by passion as far as like success goes. Jobs do vary from one area to another. Again, if you feel as though it doesn't, I challenge you to go to the middle of nowhere and try to find a job, without of course having a job initially, and tell me if the area matters or if it doesn't. So again, I just think people need to think about that before they open their mouths. Anyway, so I hope you guys got a chance to enjoy kind of like what I was saying here in the video that I kind of presented to you guys. Wanted to kind of just give you all a different perspective of kind of what I thought, and kind of going into detail, with my own opinions of, how I guess the whole area success thing kind of goes, like if it matters, if it doesn't matter. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys want to tune into more, because there will be a lot more to come, then feel free to subscribe to this video, and feel free to subscribe so you can see all the other stuff on my channel as well too. If you guys want to see all of the latest and greatest details that are going on from my Facebook page for this video channel, then you can go to the Hustler's Perspective YouTube channel. If you want to go to my blog and follow what I have going on there, then you can follow me at hustlersjackpot.com. If you want to go to the Facebook page for my blog, then you can go to the Hustlers Jackpot. If you want to go to my business page on Instagram, you can go to at the Hustlers Jackpot. And if you want to go to my personal page on Instagram, you can follow me at Cool Colas. Again, I hope everybody has a good day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you got a chance to learn something and see something from a different perspective. I will see you guys later. Keep hustling.